Welcome to the Esports Business Podcast, where we connect the time-tested principles of business and team management with the rapidly growing esports industry. I'm Ben Wiggins here with Shivneet Sharma. Thanks for checking in with us. Shivneet, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm super excited for this episode. We got a real interesting guest, and it may deviate from what our listeners usually hear us talking about, but I think he's a real good guy.
Yeah, it'll be a free-flowing conversation. I'm looking forward to it too. Why don't you tell them a little bit about the guy?
So today, we have an outstanding interview with Nathaniel Platier, the new voice of Overwatchdojo. He's an audio engineer who is jumping into the world of voice acting and video game composing. We're excited to talk about his experience working with the video game community and the lessons he's learned as he's developed his craft. On top of that, his voice is the most impressive we've had on the show so far. It's going to be a great conversation. But first, let's get some headlines.
In April 2018, the 2024 Paris Olympics organizers announced they were considering the inclusion of esports to the Games. Quoting here from Trom News Esports, Thomas Bach, president of the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, immediately reined in everyone's excitement about that by insisting that, quote, violent computer games would never be a part of the Olympics. It would be a red line for the International Olympic Committee that no computer game that encourages violence would be allowed. It may be worth noting at this juncture that in his day, Thomas Bach represented Germany to win multiple Olympic medals, including gold in fencing, the sport where you have to repeatedly stab your opponent with an actual sword to win. Almost a year later, we finally have an update on the details of this supposed esports event and how esports will feature. Prepare to be underwhelmed. While not featuring at all on the program, Paris will be offering virtual and connected events running alongside official events. In essence, you can play along the events from home in real time, pitting yourself against the athletes on the field. Shivneet, lay it on me.
So, this is, obviously what he's talking and what he's saying about esports is terrible, right? I can't argue that, but just for a tangent, I used to come from a community that I used to be a breakdancer when I was a lot younger, and so that getting that into the Olympics has been like a big thing for breakdancing, and I think recently they've just been considered into the 2024 Olympics, I believe, and that talk has been happening ever since I was in high school, right? Like almost 8-9 years ago, and I think talking about esports in Olympics is good. The way that Thomas Bach talked about it obviously is not how you go about it, and I think that just getting esports into the talk of Olympics is gonna, Thomas Bach isn't the only person. He's just the president. He has a council, he has advisory, and a lot of these people are probably a lot younger, and they probably understand the importance of esports. Now, Ben, I'm pretty sure you have a very interesting take on this.
Well, yeah. So first of all, I was not aware that breakdancing was being considered. I think that would be something kind of interesting. I might watch breakdancing at the Olympics. But as far as how they're handling esports, honestly, this is lazy F. I give it a D-. The folks in Paris just don't want to bother researching esports to find out what games they should include. They're trying to avoid angering legislators. They're trying to avoid incurring liability risk. They're trying to create a positive feedback loop to drum up interest in events that people care about less and less. For what it's worth, last year's Pyeongchang Olympics were the least watched Olympics on record. Trom News handled this story perfectly, to be honest, so I'm going to quote from them some more. What will be best received are fully fledged e-competitive events with established e-athletes at the highest level of ability meeting on a balanced field and providing a fantastic show, like everything else that happens in the Olympics. Esports at present has a global audience of over 320 million people. Spectators watch their athletes compete daily and are passionate about their performances and the dynamics of their teams. Letting fans have a go at running 400 meters on their iPad alongside the TV isn't really going to resolve the issue. I'm not impressed with this at all. Honestly, I'm much more interested in watching breakdancing than I am trying to, beat Wade Van Niekerk in the 400 meters on my iPad.
I think obviously Trom News, handled it perfectly, right? The way they said they understand what esports is, and I think the Olympic Committee doesn't yet. I'm someone from the optimistic side in this sense, where if esports is even being talked about in the Olympic Committee, that's insane, right? I mean, look a lot of sports took a long time to get into the Olympics, and I think a lot of sports are, I think golf recently considered in the Olympics or something like that. Like a lot of these sports that are, that have high level athletes that are very competitive aren't in the Olympics. Yet we have things like fencing, badminton, or we have things like fencing, wrestling, amateur boxing. I mean, you mentioned that it was the least watched Olympics, but I think esports and this breakdancing thing that's coming in as well is really gonna spice it up. So everyone is probably aware by now that Comcast Spectator is building a 3,500-seat esports stadium in South Philadelphia. They have already unveiled plenty of other projects in the 47-acre area that include a 10-story office tower as well as the Xfinity Live Entertainment and Dining Hub. But GameStop is also getting in on the fun. In a story from the esports.net, the retailer have recently announced partnerships with top-level esports teams like Complexity Gaming, Envy Gaming, and Optic Gaming, and they have gained the naming rights to Complexity Gaming's brand new training facility in Dallas. This will be an 11,000 square foot facility that will be shared with the Dallas Cowboys, the American football team owned by Jerry Jones, who also has a large stake in Complexity Gaming. The GameStop Performance Center will offer Complexity Gaming's pro esports stars the chance to boost their performance through some seriously high-tech training facilities. These include enhanced gaming equipment, advanced data analytics, and a special video studio. But the new training facility will also include many services that are designed to encourage amateur gamers to get involved. These include special gaming clinics, where amateurs will get to learn some of the tricks and techniques from some of the best gamers in the business. Ben, how do you feel about Jerry Jones and Complexity Gaming and all of this in South Philadelphia? What's happening?
Well, so most of what's happening here, I think they're talking about what's going to be going on in Dallas. But Jerry Jones, Jerry Jones is a skilled businessman, and as much as he's kind of a caricature of himself, I think he generally does good business, and he gets involved with good business ventures. And I don't know, like it's having Jerry Jones on board is always a bit of a mixed blessing. But the good news here is esports continuing to build legitimacy by building partnerships with completely unassailable brands like the Dallas Cowboys. The part that we have to get comfortable with is that big business, including, the Dallas Cowboys, people like Jerry Jones, they're going to have their fingerprints on every level of esports, even starting with the way kids are trained. Comcast built an arena in Philly because they own the Fusion. I'm a big economics guy, and I don't have kids yet, but even I would feel a little funny taking my son or daughter to the GameStop Performance Center for an esports training clinic just because that's where the best coaches are. Are they going to be learning Overwatch, or are they going to be learning about how to shop on GameStop.com? I don't know. I would want to see more about how this is actually going to be implemented. I love what gaming has done for youth, but I also want kids to have childhoods too. I don't know. Something about this makes me, feel a little funny. But overall, I think just the logical side of me says this is a great thing for esports and for the communities of Dallas and, of course, Philadelphia.
I share your sentiments with Jerry Jones. I think you share my sentiments, not probably getting Robert Kraft involved because of the recent stuff.
That's a whole other story.
But I really think that we shouldn't be worried about I think GameStop, I think you mentioned last week, partnerships should make sense, right? And I think GameStop is like a total no-brainer, right? We have Coke, Nike, we have all these big brands, and I think just GameStop just slots right in there as like, hey, we're GameStop. We trade in, we give you games for like $2 for trading credit. But, I think them getting involved in esports is like the next big step, right? I think GameStop as a company is, many people don't realize it, but I think it's slowly dying out with how you can just purchase things online. You don't really need to go anywhere. Amazon, eBay, PlayStation Store, Xbox Store, Steam, everything. Right? And I think them venturing into esports is a smart business move by GameStop. It's definitely smart by Jerry Jones, right? When you look at football, right, that's one of the biggest sports in America, and a lot of kids are not straying away, but maybe not watching football because esports is becoming really big. I think there's a hidden benefit, and it provides like a lot of older people, like maybe our parents or some other people's parents, to get involved with their kid, and they say, oh, we can go to the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. Now this father, right, that's been watching the Dallas Cowboys for as long as they can remember, right, America's team gets to go to the stadium, bring their kid there, and they can both, maybe talk to former athletes, pros, and just, people in the organization. I think this is a really good partnership. It's really smart on Jerry Jones.
The Overwatch League completed esports' first full match broadcast on national TV in the United States on ABC last weekend. The Vancouver Titans, led by an injured Seo Min-soo, took home the Stage 1 crown. The ratings are in, and they were very favorable among past esports outings on television. Per Nielsen data from Showbuzz Daily and reported on Unicorn, Saturday got 306,000 viewers with 138,000 in the 18 to 49 bracket. Sunday had 367,000 viewers with 107,000 in the 18 to 49 bracket. These numbers show that many of ABC's viewers in those time slots were not traditional esports viewers, who are typically in the prime 18 to 35 bracket, and were exposed to the league for the first time by these broadcasts. On cable television, the OWL was broadcast on both Disney XD and ESPN for its playoffs and grand finals last season. Overwatch League imported impressive viewership then as well, including 127,000 viewers for its first broadcast. Their ESPN broadcast netted 180,000 viewers, while ABC's Sunday afternoon recap of the grand finals pulled in about 300,000. Shivneet, let's hear it.
Whenever I look at these numbers and data numbers, I work as a data analyst full time. So I understand that statistics can be inflated, they can be misconstrued. And I think the 18 to 49 bracket is really, it doesn't mean much, right? When they say that, oh, usually our viewership is 18 to 35, I just think the 18 to 49 is some families may have left ABC on before they were watching. And, a lot of people like to have background noise when they do dishes, when they do cooking, when they do whatever, right? And I think that's just kind of some of that viewership probably falls into that. And I think a good amount of that viewership, though, falls into a lot of younger people trying to include their uncles, their families, their parents, right? Like, hey, look at this. Like, this is on ESPN. This is on ABC. It looks good for esports, right? That is a net benefit. It's a net benefit for ABC. It's a net benefit for everybody, right? ABC gets to get involved and they get to get their feet wet in esports, and Overwatch League, gets to get exposed to a bigger market. So I mean, personally, I think a lot of this is all good news. None of this is bad news. I know, like when last year ESPN aired some of the World Championships for League, a lot of people are getting angry. All the old people are like, this isn't real esports. This isn't real esports. But I'm starting to see a lot less of that.
Yeah, I think progress is progress. I mean, esports has a long way to go to catch the NFL. There's the NFL Sunday programs averaged 18 million viewers for Fox and 16.5 million viewers for CBS last year. Even the NBA at 1.28 million viewer averages across an 82 game season is far outstripping esports right now. So I don't know. I mean, we're making progress. People are taking esports more seriously. I think Overwatch League is really well handled and it's very broadcastable, especially this season. We've talked in this space before about how the production value has gone up so much as they've really gone to third person POVs more often, and the casters are more experienced. That sort of thing. I think overall this is a big net positive, but we do have a long way to go. Our guest today does voiceover for Overwatchdojo, but also composes music for Smashified and indie video games. Nathaniel Platier, welcome to the show.
Hey man, how you doing?
Great. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about the course of your life in gaming and career in gaming. Tell us about your experiences and kind of how you got to where you are today in the last couple of years.
I mean, honestly, everything that got me here is through video games. Voice acting, composing especially. I mean, as far as games are concerned, I'd start off with Zelda, and that's been a huge part of me growing up, and I just didn't want to put it down. So gaming has been like a core part of everything that I do, and I don't want that to stop, honestly. So,
what are your favorite games?
Oh my God. Zelda is obviously the biggest one. Anything Nintendo or Square Enix. Overwatch has become a top game for me as far as just the lore and the music and all that stuff. And so, yeah, those are probably my three favorite games. Just anything from those things are are favorites of mine.
So, we mentioned early on that you composed music, and I think I can definitely feel the influence, right? The Legend of Zelda has Ocarina of Time, Breath of Wild. I mean, you mentioned Square Enix, right? Final Fantasy X, 7, 8.
Kingdom Hearts.
Like the composing the music for that is beautiful, right? And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that composing music for video games versus movies and TV shows, it's a whole different world, right? So can you
completely
give us some insight on maybe what you did early, some challenges you maybe faced, and going against traditional composing?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I mean, like tacking on to what you were saying, like there's a huge difference between scoring music to movies and scoring music for video games and stuff like that. Like for video games, you had to listen to that same thing over and over and over again, and you want it to be catchy. You want it to be something that you don't mind listening to 1,000 times stuck in a dungeon or something like that. But with scoring for animations and yada yada, it's supposed to be more in the background and kind of augmenting the visuals, more so than trying to be a music solo per se. So, and it's more emotional it's more of an emotional journey as far as scoring for movies and yada yada. But games is something that kind of sticks with you more. It's something that you wouldn't remember music from a movie, like a score from that. But if you think of Zelda, you immediately know what the themes are, and it sticks with you. And it's something that, I mean, you grow up remembering. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super. Because I think with scoring music, there's also the background music, but there's also like the infamous, or not infamous, but very famous, block hit sound you get from Mario when you get the coins or you get the mushroom.
Yeah.
And that like the guy who did that has a legacy, right? Like he's
definitely
arguably one of the most, I would maybe say one of the more famous composers, if you want to call him that, right? He made that sound, and that's everybody knows that sound. And I think that's the challenge of composing for video games, something that's very memorable.
So holding aside Zelda, what is your single favorite piece of video game music?
Oh, geez. I'd probably have to say Final Fantasy 15 has some of the best music I've heard in a long time. But yeah, I'd say either anything from the Final Fantasy series or Kingdom Hearts, I'd say. It's a mix-up between those two, probably, for me.
Yeah, it's got to be fun.
I love Aeris's theme from Final Fantasy VII.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Red Wings theme from Final Fantasy IV. That's throwing it way back there.
Yeah. Kefka's theme.
Oh,
yeah.
Kev, dude,
So
I
good.
think Final Fantasy X is where it's at for me. Xanarkin theme. Anytime that plays, I just get like the goosebump feeling. When you're walking through the end and you can hear the theme on the piano. Ooh, yeah. I think Square Enix does a good job.
I also have a shameful confession. I like Chocobo music.
Chocobo music is really good, yeah. Well, the thing is, all the video game music, like, you can have the same, like, the theme, but it can be arranged in so many different ways, and it has a different feel every time. So the Chocobo theme can have a totally different spin to it. So it's memorable. I love that.
So, okay, now the way we know you is from doing voice work with Overwatchdojo, and anyone who's listened to this show up to this point can understand how you got into that. But you had some interesting stories about sort of how you got here and the fact that your voice didn't necessarily always sound the way that it does. What was your journey in voiceover?
Voice acting is more of a side gig for me. It's only really started about, I'd say, 5 years ago, maybe even less than that. To be honest, it started because I'm a filthy weeaboo and used to watch a lot of anime. And between anime and video games and all that kind of stuff, cartoons, just the voice behind it is what really intrigued me. So yeah, that's pretty much what got me started into it. But it's really only started to take off in the last year, I'd say.
So you do voiceover work. We obviously know that for Overwatchdojo. Do you have any hand in maybe like script writing? Maybe like, hey, I want to do a video on this, or I want to do a video on this. I think I have a really good script for it. I'm doing the voiceovers right now. Like, do you have any influence on that, or is it they just kind of hit you up and they say, hey, we need a voice?
It was originally felt like the second a bit more, but the more I was with them, the more I realized there was more of a melting pot of ideas. And it wasn't just them throwing scripts at me and me reading 4 to 5 page scripts. It's really anyone's game what we want to do. We'll obviously throw out a topic, and if we think it's promising, we'll expand upon it or cut small bits of it so it's more relevant to the meta or yada yada. But it's kind of everyone's free reign, honestly.
How much time does it take in an average week, let's say?
Oof. Well, like I said before, these scripts are not short. And they're informative ones, so there's a lot of tongue twisters and things like that. So it can take a couple of days to finish it because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I don't like any errors at all. So editing will take a long time, and there's a lot of bloopers that need to be edited down and yada yada. So it can take about 2 to 3 days, depending on how long the script is.
So I want to backtrack just a little bit, and I think going, into the voice acting, I think everybody's heard, from one person or another, that networking is very important. Are you a part of any like voice acting communities? Is there like a secret Illuminati group for voice acting I don't know about? Or because honestly, I feel like a lot of these famous voice actors just sort of pop up out of nowhere, right? Other than the famous ones, right? Like the Lucio voice actor, he kind of just came out of nowhere. A lot of the Overwatch, other than Matt Mercer and like Soldier and 76 and all of them, I feel like a lot of these guys just kind of pop out the woodwork. Is there like a community or something that we're just not aware of?
Apagando las luces.
Yeah, like that's all I hear. Yeah, like where do these people come from?
Yeah. Well, there used to be a website called the Voice Acting Alliance, and that used to be a website for a lot of voice actors that were starting out. It was more for like people that were just getting started, like with Blue Yeti microphones and USB stuff, and more so for fandoms and a few things like that. But there are other websites like Voice 123, which you can get a lot of commercial work or sometimes game gigs if you're lucky. But for the most part, if you want to get really good gigs and nail game roles and stuff like that, you have to be a local, which really sucks. You have to live in LA to be close to studios and stuff. So there's a bit of a casting couch as far as that goes. But yeah, if the good thing about voice acting is, at least for commercials, is that you can kind of record anywhere. So yeah.
So is it really just about getting that like one big sort of role, and then you kind of it literally snowballs from there?
Yes, it's all about connections, and even from what I've seen so far, even smaller gigs can open up doors to bigger gigs. Sometimes, I mean, the very first thing I ever did was a stupid fan dub for Attack on Titan called Attack on Space, and it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. But years and years later, like individual members from that group developed into more things, lived in LA, and because of that, they've spread more doors for me to open and to check things out. So it's all dependent on who you know, but it's also dependent on those first few steps too.
So you mentioned earlier, dealing with tongue twisters and being a perfectionist, that the work can be really time consuming. Are there any particularly challenging aspects of voice work that someone might not think of if they were interested in getting into voice acting?
Oh, well, obviously, one of the more relatively known ones are obviously plosives and audio pops, but that can obviously be reduced with pop filters and stuff, but something that can't, which is a huge stickler for me, is mouth noises. That's the biggest thing that I hate. Because if you're not hydrated and if you're drinking caffeine or milk, your voice makes little sticky, gross mouth sounds, and that can't really be edited out very easily. And sometimes it's easier to just re-record a line than to edit out the mouth sounds because they're really hard to find sometimes. And if you do edit them out, it may make it sound different. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for me that I hate.
Are you talking about like lip smacking? Like I'm so fascinated by this.
It's like the wet sound that happens when you open your mouth sometimes, especially if you are closer to a microphone. It will pick that up. So any like wet sounds in your mouth, the tongue, like it's gross to talk about, but anyone that has edited audio will probably know what I'm talking about.
Our listeners are riveted by this right now.
It's gross. It's that juicy ASMR that no one wanted.
Yeah, great question by me.
They're gonna love it. So as a voice actor, I'd put you in the category as an artist, right? Along with photographers, painters, and anything else like that. Where do you draw the line for doing work for exposure and doing work for getting paid for it? Because I know a problem I would say personally is in these sort of artist communities are people hiring artists for exposure, and I'll pay you an exposure, and then it's like, well, exposure doesn't pay my PG&E bill, right?
Exactly.
So where did you early in your career, did you have to do for exposure work, or do you think there should be like an eventually a movement for all, like, generally artists to be like, you know what, I want to get paid even if I'm doing a minute of voice acting? Like, what's your take, and where do you draw the line?
I completely agree that there should be a website or something to make it easier for people that are just starting and don't have that kind of following to get more people. But my personal take is, as it is right now, as it stands, is that if you're starting out, you're not going to have customers. So obviously you can't charge what you want and get paid what you want. So sometimes you sadly have to do things for exposure. It's just the way that it is for an artist or anyone really, but you should always be you should always make sure that the amount of effort that you're putting in isn't higher than the exposure you're going to get. So you don't want to do a whole bloody audiobook for someone who has 100 subscribers or something and consider that exposure. But it's something that kind of has to level out the more you do it. You'll start off having to do things for exposure, but the more you do it, the more that you have your own audience and the more people that will come to you by yourself. And then you can start doing things for the money and start kind of leveling that out, or even going above that and only doing things for money and less and no more hashtag for exposure gigs and stuff like that.
Could you tell us maybe more about your experiences with like for exposure work? Have you denied a bunch of for exposure work? Have you been like, is there like a story where somebody's like, hey,
oh yeah,
well, I wanted you to do this for exposure, and then like it's like a giant script and you're like, no, I'm not freaking doing this?
Like I said, I was someone emailed me and said, hey, I have this really good video game script that I would like to do, and I was like, yes, finally, my first actual video game that's not a visual novel dating sim type of voice thing. And I looked at it and it was a large script and I was really excited. And I said, sure, I'm definitely interested. What's your budget and stuff like that? And they said, oh, no, this is just for exposure. This is our first game and stuff like that. And it was pages of stuff that was borderline like audiobook level of script. And I had to background check them and stuff like that. And they had maybe 7 subscribers on YouTube. So that was a hard no for me.
Very quickly, in this line of work, if you had to give your try this one weird trick to, something that that helped you sort of make a jump forward in terms of either the quality of your work or the quality of your professional networking? You know, you and Shivneet were talking a little bit about the importance of connecting and finding a community. If there was one thing that either people in composing or people in voice acting did not know that would very quickly help them to kind of step their game up, what would be your try this one weird trick that you've found helpful in either of your lines of work, really?
For voice acting especially, it is always better to learn to over enunciate. The thing that I had a lot of trouble with growing up with trying to get into voice acting is that I just never enunciated as much as I needed to. And you need to do that. It's a huge thing that you need to do. Over enunciating and making everything sound crisp, almost to the point where you think you're going a little bit too much. And then you can always tone it down a little bit. And on that note, with voice acting, it's always better to go overboard charismatic and then tone it down than vice versa, where you're monotone and have to be asked to tone it up a little bit, because it's more than likely that you're going to get casted and asked to tone it down a little bit. But they're not going to commission someone that has like a monotone voice and has barely any inflection. So the biggest thing is to always go a little bit to the point where you think you're going a little bit too much, and that's probably where you need to be.
Interesting. Would you do an impression for us?
Like I told you guys before, impressions are not my forte yet, since I'm kind of new into this. But since we're on the topic of Overwatch, did someone say peanut butter?
See, I thought I was a good Winston because, you know, I'm wearing the glasses and I'm kind of hairy. Our viewers can't see it, but man, I just need that voice and I can do it perfectly.
I'm feeling angry. I'm not. Mine is not nearly as good as
Imagination
yours.
is the essence of discovery.
Oh my god!
That's great.
Okay, all right. Let's get a little back on track. Obviously I do want more impressions, but we gotta do it for our viewers later. So let's get a little bit more serious. As an artist, you know, you probably get criticism, and it's probably from every source known, you know, viewers or, you know, friends, family. So, you know, maybe talk about some of the positive feedback you've gotten, but I think I'm really interested in a lot of the negative feedback you've gotten, because I think in any community, right? It's esports, voice acting, artists, when people give you feedback, where do you say like, well, these guys are bronze or silver? Like I'm a Masters. Yeah, I'm a Masters player. Like these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like I'm better than you. Yeah. Stop trying to give me advice. Stop trying to give me criticism. How does that work for voice acting? And, you know, because obviously there's no platinum voice actors. There's no Masters voice actors, right? So like where, you know, how do you take criticism negatively? And then you can also talk about some of the positive stuff, the best advice you've been given.
Oh, God. Those first few months of being the new voice of the dojo were absolutely terrible. The dojo wanted a more charismatic and quote-unquote professional sounding voice and wanted a specific sound, but the community wasn't really ready for the transition yet, I suppose. It was kind of I'm quitting, and here's a new one immediately next week. And because I've been in voice acting for a little bit, I have a specific sound to my voice and a special timbre, I suppose. But they thought that my voice was put on, or that I was trying to fake it, or sound lower than I actually was. But my voice is just naturally low now. Like it's not. Like I'm not consciously trying to sound like Markiplier or like a deep voiced guy. Like it's just the way my voice is now. And at one point early on, it was getting so bad that people kept thinking that I was faking it and trying to sound lower and cool or something, that I actually started faking a higher voice because I was getting self-conscious about it. They kept saying it over and over again, and I was self-doubting. I was like, well, maybe I am maybe I am
Existential crisis or something. Oh my god.
Yeah, I was noticing it in real life and stuff like that. Outside of voice acting, I was like, wait, why am I doing this? Is this normal? And stuff like that. But it's just the way my voice just started to progress. And they would also go onto my channel from years ago and find things where I was talking and be like, you used to sound like this. This is obviously a fake voice now. As if like your voice doesn't mature as you get older. So yeah, of course my voice sounded completely different back then. So that was the big thing. The dojo wanted a specific sound and they wanted me to sound a specific way. But the community was kind of divided because it was kind of a culture shift as far as voices go. But at the end of the day, they're not my employer. My employer is my employer. So I ended up just ignoring them and just ignoring the comments, period. Eventually they kind of toned down and started, I think they're kind of used to it now.
I think we see it a lot with, I think you kind of had almost like if anybody who knows, and our listeners know that Lily Pichu, right? She's like a very famous YouTuber and stuff. She's a notoriously high voice. And like, I think she's been getting hate for, as long as I remember, oh, your voice is not real. That's not really how your voice sounds. And like, I think she's talked about like how it's affecting her before. And I think that happens to a lot of people, right? Like just in general, like, oh, you cut your hair this way. You never liked your hair that way, or now you're growing your hair. I think that just happens in like life. People get hypercritical of like change in somebody, and when they don't like it, they're obviously gonna comment on it, right? And I think it's inflated even more when you're behind a keyboard and you're anonymous. So I mean, I'm glad you're able to like push through that, right? Because
yeah. But yeah, it's really rough for internet personalities, period. Because, I mean, just from my own experiences, like lower voices tend to be monotone, the lower that they get, and there's a little bit less inflection in the lower range, the lower you get. And obviously that's not good for narration and stuff like that. So you have to kind of fling it a bit and make it a little bit more charismatic than you normally would talk. And people have this expectation that you have to sound exactly like you would speaking to someone else, but that's not the way it works on YouTube. You have to be professional. You have to make it sound crisp and clean and over enunciate and not stumble and mutter and things like that. So
I think from our perspective as hosts and producers, but especially like people who like on-air personalities or anyone who's sort of like a front-facing person for an organization, one of the biggest challenges, or at least this is the case for me certainly, is when you get that outside criticism. Like a lot of it is just trolling, but every now and then somebody will come at you with something that is legitimate. It sounds like in your case, a lot of the criticism has been kind of ill-founded. But on a previous show that I hosted, I got some pretty harsh feedback about midway through the show's run. And after, being angry for a couple of days and then just upset for a couple of days, I then was sort of just sad for a couple of days because I realized this person's right and I need to improve as a host.
It's one you can kind of tone out the trolls and stuff that you can obviously like be logical and say, no, that's not true, yada, yada, yada. But for those ones that actually have a bit of truth to them, those are the ones that hurt the most. And it takes a while to kind of get out of that. And it can be hard. Sometimes it is something that's actually beneficial, but just could have been worded a little bit differently. But yeah, those are probably the things that hurt the most, or the things that are seeded with truth.
Overwatchdojo is currently taking a break per their YouTube channel. So how does that affect you and your role with the company? Obviously, they're good friends of the show. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, even before I joined them, they were doing guides every week, and not just like they weren't watering it down with like announcements and news Overwatch related or things like that, or even patch notes and stuff. It was a guide every single week. So after 2 years or so of this, they've gotten kind of burnt out. And I certainly have, because 4 to 6 page scripts every week is a little bit intimidating at times. So they're taking a break, letting the meta shift a little bit, having a few more characters be added before they kind of dive back into it. And by that time, there's going to be a lot more ideas. Everyone will have had their break and have a breath of fresh air to kind of maybe look at the channel in a different light. Maybe think about esports related commentary and stuff like that. As far as guys are concerned, that's where the dojo is typically starting to focus on now, more so than individual improvement. They're starting to kind of think about what your role is in a team environment, especially in esports, and getting started into that. And I think that's something that I'm definitely interested as far as the dojo is concerned. So,
well, I'm very disappointed that you're not fired up to talk about goats for 300 days a year.
Oh my gosh, please no.
Just a quick question for anybody that doesn't know, like Overwatchdojo and stuff. Are these guys that are coaching, are these guys like GM, top 500? Are these guys ex-players? Like what is the sort of...
No, we just have a team of 6 bronze players coaching. No, of course. We have a lot of high-ranking people up there. We have a couple of GMs, masters. We also have the community itself will step in and help its own community with coaching a little bit too. There's opportunities for people to get coaching from each other, which I think is pretty interesting itself. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of high-ranking members in there. So no plat chats, don't worry.
Yeah, because I just think, from a personal perspective, I'm just going to humble brag really quickly. I'm a 3800 main tank. And like when I've always looked at coaching, I've looked at it and I'm like, well, it's the more like the bang for your buck kind of thing, right? Like a bronze person paying a X amount of money and then he goes to like platinum, that's an improvement. But like someone for me or other people in masters, if they go from 38 to 39, like, yeah, that's a big jump, I guess. But like, so I mean, yeah, I just wanted to know like the kind of people you have. Obviously, no plat chats and anything like that. So I think it's super insightful.
I'm not going to say anything about my SR right now.
I mean, tacking on to what he was saying a little bit, when I first, not the dojo, but when I first started playing Overwatch, I was a silver player. But starting actually a little bit before I started the dojo, I got into gold and yada yada, which isn't too impressive. But recently, I've gotten into masters, which is pretty exciting for me. As far as overbuff is concerned, I'm a top Orisa and top Hammond player. As far as the stats go. So me working on the scripts indirectly and just voicing them has actually been helping improve my own gameplay a bit, which is kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting that.
I like that we got all tanks on this. Chat. I play main
tanks and
tank
supports.
too.
Yeah, I just like running in and taking a bunch of damage and be like, I'm not dead, because
Yeah.
I got a question for you. Have you ever considered casting? Obviously, that's a very different discipline, but tell us about that.
It's something that I'm incredibly interested in, actually. The Overwatchdojo did one tournament about a year ago. I don't remember when, but it was a smaller tournament, but I got to cast for it, and it was probably some of the most fun I've ever had with voice acting. I've casted for Super Smash Brothers locally, but doing local tournaments versus Overwatch tournaments and stuff like that, it's an entirely different thing, and I just loved it, and I'm hoping that I get another opportunity to do it sometime.
So you mentioned the Smash Bros. Scene. I mean, how invested are you? Are you like a melee elitist? Is it all about Ultimate? Like what? I'm just wondering. I've been following.
You're brewing up a storm in the comments section pretty soon.
Just a little bit.
Shivneet's bringing the hard hitting journalism today.
I just want to know. I just want to know.
I personally like Ultimate and Smash 4, but I love both equally. I can't personally play Melee because I can't wave dash and all the things that the Smash gods can, because I never grew up with that, and it's a really tough learning curve to get into Melee, honestly. So mostly Smash 4 and Ultimate, just because I'm a filthy person that can't wave dash and all that stuff like that. But yeah, I think Smash 4 and Ultimate are my favorites.
How can our listeners follow your stuff? What would you like them to look at? Where would you like them to check in with you?
You can find me at YouTube at Nathaniel Platier. You can find me at YouTube at Nathaniel Platier. And you can also find me at Twitter at Thaniel_Platier. So there you go.
Do you want to spell any of that? Because I know your name has kind of a unique spelling.
Yeah, it's NATHANAELPLATIER. So Platier.
not Plat Chat, Platier.
Oh,
Let's
trust
go.
me, people used to make fun of me all the time while I was still on Plat.
I get it.
Nathaniel, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to check back every week for more episodes. Our newest segment with the company, in case you missed it, can be found on Instagram at Esports Business News under that handle. If you have a moment to subscribe to the pod on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review or offer us some feedback, we greatly appreciate it. We love positivity, but also we want to make this show the best it can be. If you want to do more to support us, consider joining our Patreon under Top Score Solutions and get access to exclusive content and perks. We've also put links to our Discord, Twitter, Facebook, and website in a shortened link on the show post. We appreciate you listening. Stay gold, everyone.